Good morning, everyone, or good day, depending on in which time zone you are. My name is Göran Bölin, and I work at Södertön University in Stockholm, Sweden. I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about a project that I am involved in that deals with social media surveillance and experiences of authoritarianism. I have also, this is a comparative project, and I've also mentioned my colleagues, Rita Figueiras from Universidade, Católica, Portuguesa in Lisboa, and Veronika Kalmus from Tartu University in Estonia. So we are interested in the ways in which social media work and operate in everyday life, and the types of experiences that have an impact on how people perceive of and act in relation to social media. We all know that in the age of surveillance capitalism, as Shoshana Zuboff calls it, state and social media surveillance have converged technologically. Basically using the same internet infrastructure to capture media users and to monitor state security. So the commercial interests and the state security interests collapse into one another. With the spread of smartphones and laptops and mobile and personal media, the social spheres that can be subsumed monitoring practices have multiplied to include who, when, but also where consumers and citizens are communicating. Now, the contemporary media landscape is an increasingly complex landscape that involves not only social media companies, but also a range of other players. So you can call this is an industrial, cultural production that is a complex structure where social media surveillance occur. And this is the landscape that is at the bottom of data capitalism. It includes, as I said, not only media companies, social media companies such as Facebook, Twitter, etc., but also telecom services, service providers of different kinds, distributors, but also the advertising industries, the media and publishing industry. Also they work in connection with financial services such as payment services, credit card companies, etc. And all these actors are circled around the actual consumer data and analytics industry, as is illustrated in this image here, which is produced by the Austrian researchers at Cracked Labs, where I have borrowed this picture. So within this consumer data and analytics industry, a multiplicity of different types of data circulate and are extracted from social users and processed, refined, and turned into profits for the companies. Now, the project that we are conducting at the moment takes its point of departure in this surveillance capitalism, and we are also leaning towards a range of literatures within this sector, the surveillance sector, and the literature that theorizes this intersection between state and commercial capitalism. But we also are lean on research that has thematized and theorized the new business models of data capitalism. The fact, for example, that that both the media content industries and the communications industries have joined forces to produce new business models to capture the digital consumer. And we can see that in this landscape, people like Barnes 2006 have theorized this in terms of a privacy paradox, where people are at least basically aware of the fact that their data is used for producing advertising that is tailored to their consumer profile. But although we know this, we also at the same time agree to the terms of service of these companies. Another background is, of course, traditional research into state surveillance, CCTV, for example, projects that lean on surveillance and the questions of surveillance and democracy, and especially that research that focuses on biometric extraction of biometric data. So it's quite well established in this research that the attitudes of citizens towards media surveillance are mixed, and where media users are skeptical towards social media and state surveillance, but at the same time they do very little in terms of protecting themselves through privacy settings on social media, for example. So this datafied media landscape has brought with it a range of new business models that build on the extraction of the data of social behavior in digital space. So the basic idea of our project is that we think that it's fair to expect that attitudes towards state surveillance have an impact on attitudes towards social media surveillance. And we can expect that generations that have grown up under totalitarian or authoritarian surveillance regimes will have different attitudes towards social media surveillance also, compared to generations that have been brought up in liberal democracies, such as Sweden. One can also expect that levels of trust towards governmental institutions and media institutions will have an impact on attitudes towards social media surveillance, and it should thus make sense to conduct a cross-cultural comparison of approaches to social media surveillance among different generations and between different countries with different experiences of totalitarianism and surveillance, but with similar levels of trust in governmental institutions. So for the rest of my talk, I will account for the analytical and methodological approach to analyze under what conditions media users accept social media surveillance and to what extent experiences of surveillance practices under totalitarianism, authoritarianism, and liberal democracy affect such acceptance. And the examples that we have focused on is the totalitarian experiences from the post-Soviet conditions of Estonia, the experiences of authoritarian conditions in Portugal, and the conditions in a long-term democracy, liberal democracy such as Sweden. And the project focuses on the question on which role the legacy of totalitarianism and or authoritarian experiences has for the attitudes to social media surveillance and social media use in more generally. So the aim of the project is to analyze the conditions under which social media users accept surveillance and the extent to which surveillance experiences under totalitarian, authoritarian, and democratic regimes affect this acceptance. Now, the comparative cultural study of approaches to surveillance by social media, we have focused on different generations with different experiences in order to try to capture possible differences in attitudes towards social media surveillance and to surveillance capitalism more generally. So the choice, the three researchers that are in the project, we represent each of us one of those conditions. So we have chosen Estonia as a post-totalitarian society in the sense that it was totalitarian under the Soviet regime up until 1989-90, when the Soviet Union collapsed and Estonia became an independent sovereign nation state in 1991. We have the post-authoritarian experiences of Portugal, formerly under the dictatorship of Salazar, but then after the post-authoritarian and democratic Portugal after the mid-1970s. And then we have, as a comparison, Sweden as a long-term liberal democracy. The fact that Sweden is a liberal democracy since long does, of course, not prevent that there has been a discussion about state surveillance in Sweden, CCTV cameras, for example, or the surveillance of radio traffic, which has been also ongoing for the last couple of years. The idea of the project is to analyze two generations in each country, one that has direct and personal experiences of authoritarian or totalitarian society, and one younger generation that has been brought up under non-authoritarian or totalitarian conditions. And this means that we are interested in quantitatively and qualitatively focus on two generations in each country, where we are this autumn conducting a nationwide survey in both countries in these two generations. One having their formative years according to generation theory, that is between roughly 17 and 25, that have been brought up under authoritarian or totalitarian conditions, and one generation that has been born after independence and in the post-authoritarian and post-totalitarian societies of Portugal, Estonia, and Sweden. We are now then trying to establish in a survey, online survey, the attitudes towards state and social media surveillance among these two generations. And following from that, we will in a later stage use this material to the findings from the empirical data, the statistical data, to use those findings to go deeper into how attitudes towards surveillance have possibly affected attitudes towards social media surveillance. And we're going to do that through focus groups in all three countries. And we want to understand the depth, the way users relate to social media surveillance. So what we hope to achieve with this research is two kinds of epistemological findings. First, we will of course produce an empirical data about attitudes and considerations about surveillance in social media, and attitudes and considerations towards state surveillance and commercial surveillance. And we, based on that, we intend to formulate theoretical knowledge to contribute to audience studies, surveillance studies, as those two areas who are, so to speak, at the intersection with media and audience studies, in order to bring back these findings to the literature that I mentioned at the start of my talk. So, with this short account of the project that I'm presently working on, I want to thank you all for listening and for discussing this possibly after this talk. Obrigado.